What happens when Kawasaki's most iconic muscle bike philosophy meets one of Honda's greatest four-cylinder roadsters? You get a battle that motorcycle fans have been waiting for. On one side, the Kawasaki ZRX1100, a machine remembered for its aggressive attitude, massive four-cylinder character, and unmistakable street fighter presence. On the other, the Honda CB1300 Super Four, refined, sophisticated, and built around the legendary idea of a big, smooth inline-four. But now imagine Kawasaki bringing the ZRX name into a new era. A 2027 ZRX1100. Not simply a retro motorcycle with a familiar badge, but a modern interpretation of the muscle bike formula. Could it actually challenge or even dominate the CB1300? Let's break it down. To understand why a modern ZRX1100 would be so interesting, you have to understand what made the original special. The ZRX was never trying to be a lightweight supersport. It was about presence. A big engine, a muscular fuel tank, an aggressive stance, and that unmistakable Kawasaki attitude. The original ZRX1100 became famous because it delivered something different from the typical sport bike. It was fast enough to be serious, but comfortable enough to enjoy on the street. And most importantly, it had character. That's exactly what makes the ZRX name so powerful today. Modern motorcycles have become incredibly capable, but sometimes capability isn't the same thing as personality. And that is where the ZRX could have an advantage. But don't underestimate Honda. The CB1300 Super Four represents a completely different interpretation of the big four-cylinder motorcycle. Where Kawasaki's philosophy is aggressive and muscular, Honda's approach is smooth and mature. The CB1300 has always been about effortless power delivery, stability, comfort, and that classic inline-four experience. It's the kind of motorcycle that doesn't need to shout. It simply delivers. And that's why comparing these two motorcycles is so interesting. The Kawasaki says, "Look at me." The Honda says, "Take a ride." Two completely different personalities, and that's what makes this battle more than a numbers game. Now, imagine Kawasaki taking the original ZRX formula and updating it for 2027. The goal wouldn't necessarily be to create the most powerful naked bike on the market. Instead, Kawasaki could focus on what made the ZRX special in the first place. A large displacement inline-four, strong mid-range torque, a planted chassis, modern electronics, and styling that doesn't apologize for being aggressive. Imagine a modern ZRX with ride-by-wire throttle control, selectable riding modes, traction control, modern ABS, a premium suspension package, and a digital display hidden inside a classic-looking cockpit. That's where the formula becomes interesting. Because the motorcycle could look old school without actually riding old school. And that's exactly what today's retro performance market is missing. On paper, the Honda has one enormous advantage: refinement. Honda knows how to make a large four-cylinder motorcycle feel incredibly smooth and predictable. But Kawasaki could attack from another direction: character. The ZRX formula has always been about attitude, a stronger visual presence, a more aggressive riding position, and an engine character that makes the motorcycle feel alive. If Kawasaki gets that balance right, the ZRX could appeal to riders who think modern naked bikes have become too complicated, too aggressive, or simply too similar. And there's another advantage. The ZRX name already has history. It doesn't need to invent an identity. It already has one. And this is where things get really interesting. The ZRX and CB1300 aren't necessarily fighting for the same rider. The Honda is the gentleman. The Kawasaki is the rebel. The CB1300 delivers classic four-cylinder refinement. The ZRX delivers muscle bike attitude. And if Kawasaki brings the ZRX name back, it doesn't need to beat Honda in every specification. It simply needs to give riders a reason to choose Kawasaki. That's a much more difficult challenge, because horsepower numbers can be forgotten, but character isn't. There are 5 things Kawasaki would need to get right. First, the engine. It needs that unmistakable inline-four character, not just impressive numbers. Second, the design. The ZRX needs to look like a ZRX, not another generic modern naked bike wearing a retro badge. Third, weight. A muscle bike can be big, but it can't feel unnecessarily heavy. Fourth, electronics. Modern safety and rider aids should be included, but they shouldn't destroy the mechanical personality. And finally, price. Because if Kawasaki can deliver all of this at a price below the premium European alternatives, the ZRX could become extremely attractive. So, does the 2027 Kawasaki ZRX1100 really dominate the Honda CB1300 Super Four? Not necessarily. And that's actually what makes this battle exciting. The Honda represents refinement. The Kawasaki represents attitude. The Honda is the polished veteran. The ZRX is the muscle bike rebel that could return with something to prove. If Kawasaki ever brings the ZRX1100 philosophy into a modern 2027 machine, it won't need to destroy the CB1300. It simply needs to remind riders why big inline-four motorcycles became legendary in the first place. Because in an era of increasingly electronic and complicated motorcycles, sometimes the motorcycle with the biggest personality is the one people remember. And if Kawasaki gets the formula right, the ZRX name could become dangerous again. So, which one would you choose? The refined Honda CB1300 Super Four or the aggressive Kawasaki ZRX1100? Let me know in the comments. And if Kawasaki really brings this muscle bike philosophy back, you can bet this battle isn't going to end here.